But I do want to say good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome to FMA's Fabcast series of interactive web-based instructional seminars. My name is Jen Christian, and I'm your host for today's program. Our Fabcast today is titled Dealing with Jerks at Work. I just wanted to add we had a overwhelming response to this one, which was kind of good and kind of interesting. So anyway, thank you for joining us. And I wanted to remind you that anyone can join you. Your registration for the program covers as many people from your organization as you wish to participate. So if you're sitting in a conference room all by yourself, feel free to have some additional people join you. You may have done that already since we've been waiting like 10 minutes. But at the end of this podcast, you'll be emailed a survey from me to get your thoughts about the program. However, only the registrant will receive the survey, so if you've had other people join you, please forward it on to them as well. We greatly appreciate your feedback and any comments or questions you have about the program. And again, I want to apologize for the technical difficulties, but hopefully it'll be smooth sailing from here. So I just wanted to talk about the platform really quickly. If you've never used this before, it's called OnStream. They provide our webinars for us. And before we get started, I just wanted to go over some of the main features of the platform, in case you haven't figured them out already. But if you experience any technical difficulties, you can press *0 to speak to an operator at time. And we request that you keep your phone line muted. I always muted everyone, but when I unmute, if you're not speaking, if you could just keep your line muted by pressing *6 to mute and then *6 again to unmute your individual line. I'll open the lines up at the end for Q&A, but in the meantime, you can type your questions in that chat box in the lower left-hand corner. I think some of you have already seen that and have used that, so thank you. So I'll keep track of the questions as you submit them throughout the program. And then before I introduce our speakers, I did want to mention FMA and our membership. If you were at FabCheck last week and stopped by the FMA booth, we are running a membership special right now through the end of this month. So I know many of you are already FMA members, but if you want to upgrade your membership, or if you're not a member and you'd like to sign up, we're running a FabCheck special. So our individual membership is normally $150, and the special is only $99 for the annual membership. And then if you want to upgrade from your company membership to Company Plus, it's normally $14.95, which is really a great deal. You get access to all of our webinars. We archive our webinars in our bookstore online, so you would have access to all of those. That's including your membership fee, and then also our e-learning courses. We have a whole platform of e-learning courses, 11 of those up. Plus you get other benefits along with that, like a free registration to our annual meeting, which will be in Scottsdale this year, March 7th through the 9th. We also have a pre-employment assessment tool, job board, just a whole host of things that right now you can get for $9.99 for the Company Plus membership. So I just wanted to do a little plug there for FMA and our membership, because it is really the best deal out there. So contact me if you're interested, and I can get you set up with a membership or an upgrade if you're already a member. So with that, I would like to introduce our speakers today. We have Mike Mastriani. He's the president of MGM Consulting, a firm specializing in training, coaching, leadership development, planning, and human resources support. Previously, he served as president of Rock Valley College. Mike has a broad background in educating others and draws on that experience to provide individualized executive and management coaching to regional businesses. And then we also have Norm Dozenbrook, who is a licensed clinical professional counselor who has over 30 years experience in the fields of mental health, consulting, coaching, teaching, business, and alternative dispute resolution processes. Their full bios are up on the website under the course description. I won't read through them since we're running a little behind this morning, but I had the pleasure of working with both of them last year at our annual meeting in a roundtable. The room was packed, and it was a great response. So looking forward to hearing what they have to say today about dealing with jerks at work. So with that, Norm, you can take it away.
All right, thanks very much. Hopefully you can hear us, right?
We can hear you.
Good. Well, I'm Mike of the Mike and Norm team, and I'm going to start out today by just telling you a little bit about something that we found in our practice, and that's the quality of the product or service is direct proportion to the quality of the ongoing relationships. And what we're meaning by that is that if you're not having a good time or you're not getting along with people at work, it's going to spill over and affect the product or the process. If you're a service organization, the service that you're trying to provide. I remember going to a fast food Italian restaurant. There was one person behind the counter, there was the cook, and there was me. That's all that was in there. So I went in and I said, hey, excuse me. He said, how big are your small cheese pizzas? And the woman looks over her glasses and glares at me and makes a little circle with her hand. So I said, well, cook me up a small cheese. So she grabs her microphone and says, number 3, Bob. I don't know why she needs a mic because Bob's standing right next to her, but okay, whatever. So she says, that'll be $2.95. I said, for a whole pizza? She says, you want a whole one? I said, yeah, if cancel that, Bob, make that a number 9. All right, that'll be $9.95. Okay, so meanwhile, I see her putting breadsticks in a little bag, and I said, how much more for the breadsticks? It comes with the pizza. I said, oh, okay, geez. So pretty soon I'm kind of killing time waiting for the pizza and breadsticks, and I look up on the wall, and there's a plaque, she's Employee of the Quarter. And I'm thinking, oh, my, who didn't get the award? I hope Bob did. He's making the food. So, you know, if you're stressed or you're not getting along or there's problems in your own life, it's going to spill over in your practice. I mean, it's pretty much common sense. You can't ignore issues. You know, a lot of us just assume not have to deal with conflict at all or the problem person in the room. I remember Norm and I did a work for some hospital team, and we seemed like everybody was getting along very well. So right before the break, Norm said, can you just write down the names of the people that are bothering you? And we'd like to just we're not going to share that, but we want to get a scope of what the issue is. And so everybody was writing down the same name. And so here you have a unit of 25 or 30 people, and one person seemed to be the problem. Ironically, after we talked to them and coached them on these techniques, which they apparently used, that woman left. So about a month or two later, we get a phone call that another unit was looking for some help because they liked what happened at that first unit. We arrive on the scene. There's that same nurse. Now she's spread her problems onto another unit. So, you know, it doesn't take many people to really begin to make issues. And sometimes it's that one or two. You know, we have problems with crime rates in our town. And, you know, it's a town with about 300,000 people in the city plus surrounding areas. And there are 70 people, the police chief said, that cause most of the crime. 70 people are causing all the grief. I said, I wish we had the names of those 70 people. Let's escort them out of town. But, you know, you can't deal with ignoring the issue. If you're waiting for Myrna to retire and she's 27 years old, you're going to have a long wait. In addition, it takes time to change. If somebody's not been doing well, just because you share that with them once doesn't mean that they're going to say, gee, thanks for sharing. You're going to help me grow as a person. They're going to struggle to stay the same way that they are now. So it's better to deal with it and to confront it, but you have to do that properly. We had another instance where we were working at a manufacturing firm, and they said, we had a woman that didn't bathe. I said, well, that's got to be terrible. What have you done? And they said, well, we left a bar of soap at her workstation. I said, well, did that work? No, so we left an anonymous note, you should bathe. I said, did you ever think of calling her aside and telling her? And the person said, well, that would be cruel. And I'm saying, what's soap and a note doing for her? So I think that sometimes if we can confront properly, this is going to help us in the long run. And confrontation without damaging that ongoing relationship is going to take some time. You'll notice that the quality of the working relationships depends on how well the work group communicates. And so we spend time dealing with communication skills, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. You'll notice that any time that there's any kind of change from one way of doing things to another way of doing things, that doesn't happen with ease. As a matter of fact, we kind of call the time in between or the stuff in between the misery zone. And a lot of times this is something that we bump into that can be a problem. And consider if you went home tonight and told your significant other, honey, I listened to these two guys today on a webcast, and here's 10 things I think that you need to change. What likely response would you get? And I think if you're like the rest of us, you're going to have something like, you're going to say, 10 things? I got a list of 20 for you. You're going to get blamed. Or some people would be nervous about that or resentful that you brought it up or give you the silent treatment. They might resist it. They might be stressed about it. They might be angry about it. So when you pound into that misery zone, and this is the reaction you get, usually you have one of two options. The first one is that you go back to the old way. And a lot of times people will say, well, never mind. I'm sorry I brought it up, and let's just try to forget about it. But you can't forget about it because it's already out there. Other people will try to move ahead through the misery zone and get to the other side. But sometimes that's not without some heat getting turned up. So I was watching a National Geographic special on big cats. That and Shark Week, I'm addicted. I got to see it. So don't know what it is. But one of the things I noticed was that how lions hunt. And when the lions get real old and can't really run after the wildebeest anymore and hunt them, they just kind of hide in the tall grass. And as the wildebeest comes toward them, they get up and they roar. It scares the daylights out of the wildebeest, and they go in the opposite direction, right into the jaws of the younger lions who can catch them. Had the wildebeest just kept on going, they probably would have went, yeah, there they go, and they can't do anything about it because they're too old to run after them. I can relate. So, I guess the moral of that story is you have to go toward the roar. The thing that makes you the most stressed, which is going through this misery zone, it's okay. It's going to be fine. You just have to move through it. So for change to occur, Norm and I have discovered that there's really three things that have to happen. A jolt, a decision, and an action. A jolt is something that catapults us into that misery zone. Something's got to get stirred up, and that's where people get a little confused. I want to resolve my conflict, but I don't want to stir anything up. I don't want anybody to be angry. I don't want people to be frustrated. I don't want the work team to be upset. You're going to get that as a byproduct if you're really going to change. Consider how many of you would drive home tonight and say, I've got a few bucks in the bank. I love my job. Relationships at home are great. My employees like me. I like them. I think I'll go see that Norm therapist guy. I think I'll go to the therapist. Is that when you go to the therapist when everything is fine? No, you go when things are stirred up. And so, if you think the radio's talking to you personally or the dog's telling you what to do, maybe it's time for an intervention. Most of the time, we're not going to change unless we have to. Once we get that jolt, which catapults us into that misery zone, we have a decision to make. What am I going to do? How am I going to deal with this? And then finally, even decisions aren't very effective unless action is taken. A little while ago, I went to the doctor, and he did some blood work, and he came back, and he said, stop, those triglyceride levels are horrible. And I said, really? I don't know what they are, but, sounded pretty serious to me. He said, yeah. He said, that's the sugar content of your blood. He says, you realize that a slice of white bread has more sugar than a bowl of ice cream? I said, I can eat ice cream? He said, no, I don't want you to do anything. I want you to go on the South Beach diet. So I thought, well, I'm kind of a small guy. I can still fit my first communion suit. What do I need a South Beach diet for? But the doctor says, yeah, he says, you have to go on a South Beach diet. So that was a jolt. And from that jolt, I made a decision and I took action. I changed doctors. No, I'm kidding. What I did instead was I did what he said. And as difficult as that was of a decision to make, an action to take, and that means eating differently, he was right. I mean, I lost a little weight. The triglyceride levels went down, but not without a struggle. I mean, I complained about it so much, and everybody that saw me ran in the opposite direction, like those lions we just talked about, because they didn't want to hear me complain about the diet anymore. So it occurs not all the time with the ease that we'd like to think. Well, I know that people personally and organizationally have a couple of different considerations for how they need to change. There's two ways. One is outside-in change, and the other is inside-out change. Let's talk about outside-in change first. This is where I'm waiting for something outside of me to help make a difference in my own life or help me feel better. You'll be surprised of how many people and how many organizations really worry about outside-in change. We all kind of believe that. And think to yourself, have you felt bad, so maybe you bought something, or you kind of feel down and out, I'm going to treat myself to something, thinking that something outside of me is going to make a difference in how I feel. 12-step groups kind of start with this. They eventually work on the inside of stuff, changing how you're thinking, but initially they just start out with some very simple behavior change. If you're driving down the 4th Street and you stop at the 4th Street bar and you drink, what's the suggestion you're going to get from your counselor? Probably drive down 5th Street. Go home a different route. So if you just go home a different route, does that mean that from now on I'm going to be fine? Not necessarily. Eventually I have to apply the steps to change how I think, this thinking. But and Norm and I know this because we joined a 12-step group for people who talk too much called On and On and On. So, you'll groan now, but you'll be telling that later. So, it's the outside-in change works, but doesn't always work for long-term progress. Now, most companies will do this as well. They do an attitude and opinion survey, and they say, ooh, the employees, their morale is low. We have to do something. So let's give an across-the-board increase. Let's give a 3% across-the-board increase. Well, if you think the place sucks and you get a 3% across-the-board increase, how do you feel? Oh, more money at the place that sucks. You're richer and miserable. So they say, Mike is still unhappy. Let's make him employee of the quarter. He can park right next to the building. And I'm saying to myself, I get to the place sucks quicker and drier in the morning now. So nothing really changes because I haven't changed how I'm viewing things. And I think the distinguishing information that Norm and I present versus a lot of other people that talk on this subject are a lot of people will work on the behaviors and feelings. We really work more on how people are thinking. Because if you can influence how you're thinking, the behavior and feelings will change. You can change, and that's the inside-out piece. You can change the feelings if you change how people are thinking. For example, someone's tailgating you on the way home, and they're driving you crazy, and they're trying to get around, and they're right on your bumper, and finally you just pull to the side of the road and let them go. What do you think you'd be thinking? Gee, I hope they arrive at their destination safely. Unlikely. You're probably going to be thinking, what a moron. Where's a cop when you need one? He could have killed us, and be angry about it, But what happens if somebody said that guy needs to get home right away? His wife was taken to the ER, and he's got to watch his kids. Now how do you feel about it? Once that think changes, now I'm empathetic and supportive in trying to help him where he needs to go. So even something that quickly will change how you feel and how you act. So we really try to emphasize a lot more about what you're doing and how you're thinking rather than how you're feeling. Our thinking, a lot of it is almost like lenses and glasses. If your prescription lenses are off in your glasses or your contacts, you're going to see everything as blurry. It's not the people's fault. They got to try harder to be seen clearly. It's not your fault that you don't have the right attitude. You have to really change the glasses or the contacts, and then all of a sudden, when that happens, the world looks a little clearer. So you can't expect to change feelings until you change thinking. Now, corporate cultures, Norm and I have found, are really shared perceptions. A lot of people who think alike get together and reinforce their thinking. And so sometimes those are changes that have to take place. And Norm and I did a program for FMA in the past on millennials in the workplace. And I'm not going to badmouth millennials. Many people on this might be a millennial. So, we're not doing that. And there's a lot of wonderful things they do. They're probably the most educated of all groups. They're the most technologically advanced of all generations. And there's going to be a whole load of them. By the time 2025 comes around, about 70% of the workforce will be millennials. The one thing that they do, kind of nice in a way, is they'll try to affect changes in the organization, and if not, they get together with other millennials and change it their way anyway. And so, I think that something that we can learn from that is that your culture is really a product of people that are of like mind, that are trying to do some things from the inside out. And so there's a lot I think we can talk about regarding inside out versus outside in change. And Norm's going to talk a little bit about the psychology of this, the psychology of perceptions, and how we might be able to manage those perceptions and how that applies to changing ourselves and then also making changes in other people. So I'm going to now turn it over to Norm.
Good morning, everybody. This is Norm Dasenbrook. Part of the presentation of the webinar that I want to talk about now is trying to understand why people behave the way they do, why they feel the way they do. There's a lot of different theories in psychology, right? Most of them I don't agree with. But we need to find some way to understand people, because if we're going to deal with a conflicted situation or a jerk at work or a difficult person, I always ask supervisors or management, what's your game plan or what's your strategy? And most of us don't have one. If we do, it's an eye for an eye. I'm going to treat them just as well as they treat me. And I think it was Gandhi once said, if you do an eye for an eye strategy long enough, everybody goes blind. So we have to have some way that we can understand why people do what they do, not only for the others that we deal with, but for ourselves, our departments, our company. As Mike said, a corporate culture is a shared set of beliefs. So let's take a little bit of a look about how this works. And the best way that I've found to try to illustrate this is to take a look at the old stimulus response. Now, most of us remember that in psychology class that in the face of a certain stimulus, you elicit a certain response. And in the laboratory, that's probably true. But what we find is when we apply that to humans, you can have the same stimulus, but you can get a variety of different responses. Why is that? If the same thing happens, why do we get different responses? Think about, let's say, a change at work, for example. Why do some people never break stride, right? They incorporate that change right on in. They keep right on moving. Other people grind to a halt. Oh, my God, I can't believe they changed this. And some people walk around going, oh, did we change that? Again, the same stimulus, but you get a variety of different responses. Think about inside yourself. Have you ever been happy but a little nervous about something? You know, you buy a brand new car and you're worrying, well, can I really afford it? I'm doing something new and that's exciting, but it's a little scary. How can you get competing emotions at the same time? Well, the best way to illustrate that is to take a look at what we call an ABC model. And this was developed many years ago. In the old days, we used to call this rational emotive. Today, it's called cognitive behavioral. It's something you want to Google. There's plenty of information on it that talks about how it looks in this model. So A here is the activating event. It's the stimulus. And once we have a stimulus, then we have feelings or emotions, right? Something happens and I feel a certain way. You know, I get a good performance evaluation. I feel good about things. The boss chews on me, and I'm kind of depressed or frustrated or upset. But again, we can have the same event, which then drives our behavior. Okay, something happens. I feel a certain way, and I behave accordingly. Let's say, I don't know, you win $1 million in the lottery, and how are you feeling? Probably pretty happy. What are you doing? Probably resigning my job, right? So I win $1 million. I feel good about my bad self, and I'm out of here. But what we also find then too, as I was saying earlier, is you can have the same stimulus or the same activating event, and you get a variety of different feelings and behaviors in your company, your organization, in your community. I don't need to get into the political climate these days, but we have the same things going on, but we got a lot of different feelings and behaviors, right? So let's take a look at if something happens at A and then C, the emotions, feelings, and behaviors are different, what's the difference? Well, you can see that something must happen between A and C, the B part, that causes the feelings and the behavior. In this cognitive model that Mike and I use, we call that perceptions. It's how we evaluate the events. It's basically what we say to ourselves. So it's not so much what happens in our work life or home life or community. It's how we see it. It's how we evaluate it. It's what we say about it that causes our feelings and our behavior. In this model, feelings and behaviors are sidelined. They're byproducts, right? They're the caboose to the train. If I want to change how I feel and how I behave, sometimes I need to change how I look at things. That's why I've always had a problem with anger management. Because I always tell people, why do you want to manage it? Wouldn't you want to cut it off at the pass? Why be angry? Wouldn't it be better to be annoyed or irritated? Why do we have to wait till I get angry to do something about it? So as you hopefully can see through this model, everything that happens gets filtered through the perceptions, how we evaluate things, and what we say to ourselves that causes the feelings and the behavior. Going back to Mike's example about lenses in the glasses, right? Everything gets filtered through that. So for the sake of argument, let's say those lenses are off 5 or 10 degrees. What if they're skewed or a little bit distorted? That means everything that comes past that's going to be equally distorted, equally skewed, or 10 or 15 degrees right or left of center, right? And some of you are probably thinking, oh, he's talking about that art of positive thinking thing. And no, I'm not. I call that the art of positively lying to yourself. It's kind of like the old concept about the half a glass of water. Hopefully there's some people old enough to remember the Peace Corps ad that talks about, is the half a glass of water half full or half empty? I don't know about you, but to us, it's just a half a glass of water. It has no value. You can dress it up, you can dress it down. You can go, oh, great, sunshine, it's half full. Or you can go, oh my God, I got half a glass of water left. Or if you've ever been through downsizing, you could say, you know what, we got twice as much glass as we need here. Me, again, it's a half a glass of water. So let's take a look at, if we can buy for a minute, things get filtered through that B part, those perceptions, that belief system. Let's take a look at some common critical thinking errors that most people make. First one is most people have a tendency to polarize. So when something happens, how do I evaluate it? It's usually in the polarities. So at work, I've got a good boss, I got a bad boss, I got a good evaluation, I got a bad evaluation. I have loving children, I have children from hell. We see things in the polarities. So if we see things in the polarities, how do we expect to feel? We're going to think way up and way down, right? If you have an option of having either a good or bad day, you only have 2 choices. That means before you get up tomorrow, before you even open your eyes, you stand a 50% chance of having a rotten day. It could be, I like 16 ways how my day might go. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be wonderful, it could be subpar, it could be average, it could be mildly disappointing. You see what I'm talking about here? It's not so much good or bad. If I see things in the extremes, I'm going to behave that way. And I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship or worked with somebody that's on one of those emotional roller coasters, way up, way down. You get a chance to go on the ride for free. So what we know now within ourselves or with somebody that we're working on, if somebody's way up and way down, they're looking at things in the polarities. What do we need to do to help them get back to the center? Sometimes people have what we call negative-based ideation, or I like to call it awfulizing. We look on the dark side of things. Where does that come from? Probably childhood. If you got 4 A's and a D on your report card, what'd you spend dinner talking about, right? So you focus on the D. No matter what's going on, I'm always looking for what's wrong. And then I say to myself, things are awful, horrible, terrible, and catastrophic. And when I tell myself those kinds of things inaccurately, I'm going to feel awful, horrible, terrible, and catastrophic. You know what? I'm going to be miserable to be around. I always tell people, what do you want on your tombstone? Crabby, intense, a pain in the ass? Then if we don't want that, then we need to be able to make some changes. Another common thinking error that most people have is self-worth. If you could measure our self-esteem, not our egos. I see a whole lot of people with big egos. But if you could measure our self-worth or self-esteem like oil in our cars, most of us would be a quarter too low. And if our self-esteem isn't where it needs to be, everything gets filtered through that. And these are the people that chronically feel like they get the short end of the stick. The folks that you say, hey, it's a nice day. Well, if it doesn't rain. Or, hey, you got your vacation approved, your month vacation? Yeah, except the one day I really wanted. And you're thinking, man, what's going on with those people? They always kind of look on the dark side. And it would be like if they did win $1 million in the lottery and you say, hey, you won $1 million, how do you feel? Well, it's a rip-off. What do you mean it's a ripoff? You don't win $1 million. You only win $750,000. Liars, United States of America. Why don't they just call it the $750,000 lottery and be honest about it? If it was up to me, I wouldn't have wasted $1 on the ticket. And hopefully some of you are chuckling because you know people like that, right? So now this gives you some ideas of what's going on in people's heads that's driving their feelings and their behavior. The last one we take a look at is overgeneralization. I see this a lot in my clinical practice, and Mike and I see it a lot when we do the consulting. People have this life script. I never get what I want. Nobody treats me with respect. I just don't know what to do. And, those are just, a couple of life events that we overgeneralize. So when someone says, I just never get what I want, I always ask, you've never been through the McDonald's drive-through and they got your order straight? Or I just don't know what to do. Well, you must know something because you tied your shoes and you got to my office. When we think like that, it's defeatist. When I overgeneralize like that, I don't try new things and I get stuck. So hopefully you can see some of this stuff because we're going to take it back here to take a look at what we need to do in dealing with difficult people is to be able to focus on perceptions, how people evaluate it, and what they say to themselves. If we want to change behavior and feelings in ourselves, our department, our company, we need to be able to change the perceptions on how people see things. If we do that, it's like dominoes. The emotions and feelings and behavior change automatically. So one of the ways that we can do that is effective communication. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mike to talk about just one technique. We have many. One technique that deals with the perceptions. I will talk then about a group problem-solving activity that deals with perceptions because, again, if you can get to perceptions and self-talk, you can change things inside yourself and others, and I almost hate to say this, but fairly easily.
All right, thanks, Norm. We're going to be looking at some effective communication and confrontation techniques, and I will tell you that confrontation scares people. Why? Well, we didn't effectively do that when we were kids. How many confrontations did you win growing up? And Norm probably has mentioned that that oftentimes we weren't so successful at that. And so the thought of confronting now or being confronted is kind of scary. A lot of times the reason that is it wasn't done properly. I mean, when the police pull you over to give you a speeding ticket, it's not with a whole lot of love and affection, and sometimes it's mutual. So we have problems sometimes with it, and the reason is that there's so many different ways that we can approach resolving these conflicts. And so I always tell people there's a right and a wrong way to confront. I can say, you got a face that'll stop a clock, or I can say, when I look at you, time stands still. So we're trying to do this in a way that preserves that ongoing relationship because I got to work with you, but at the same time makes the point and stops the behavior. So here's 5 different things in terms of conflict styles that you can use, because we don't just give you one technique. There's 5 of them, and I want to explain a little bit about each one. The first one is to smooth over or smoothing. This is something that's concerned with the relationship but not making a point. And there are times when I have to smooth over the relationship and not care about the point. For example, there's a customer or client in your office pounding on the table and screaming and yelling. It might not be the time to quote about the company policy. Might be time to listen and let them vent. And so smoothing over makes sense. Sometimes when we do this as a live presentation, people say, well, at home, if things aren't going real well and we're in an argument, I don't want to point things out. I might want to just sit there and let my spouse or significant other vent and then try to work it out after that. So now that's great. And sometimes we do have to kind of let people vent or agree or whatever else. But if I do that too much, then people view me as a pushover because I'm not making my point and I'm not changing behavior. I'm just patting everybody on the head and making them feel good. Sometimes you need to do that. You can't overuse that. Same with withdrawal, where I just don't deal with it at all. I see somebody coming down the hall. They've been in my office 3 times already. So I just hide, you know. I got to go to a meeting, or I don't, somebody's calling again on the phone and I just don't answer back. Or I refer to a higher authority. Sometimes we need to do that. When we've had a belly full, or when we know that I'm not in the mood to be dealing with it, maybe it's a good time to just say, let's take a break. I mean, I have a lot of experience with union negotiations because the college had a couple of 3 unions. And sometimes there's just you're going to caucus. You're going to break from negotiation and go into your own room so you can vent, so you don't do that with the other party there and make the situation worse. The problem is if I overuse withdrawal, then I become invisible. Consider the child that goes to dad and say, Dad, can I have the car tonight? Well, ask your mother. Dad, can I stay out a little later tonight? Some of my friends, ask your mother. Dad, can I have a few bucks? We want to go to the mall. Ask your mother. Pretty soon the kid's going to go right to mom because dad is giving all his power away. So if you withdraw too much, you become invisible. Forcing is a technique that really makes your point, but doesn't preserve the relationship. It's at the expense of the relationship. Here's where I'm just saying, hey, fine, sorry you feel that way, but this is how it's going to be, and that's that. And, again, there are times when that makes a lot of sense. If a child is about ready to jump off the couch, you might want to make sure that doesn't happen instead of, talking about how they feel. So, forcing would be a good thing to do sometimes when it's an emergency. If the parking lot's getting paved and everybody has to park in parking lot B instead of parking lot A, there's no discussion. Just do that or you're going to have tar in your car. So, but if I'm always barking out orders like a pirate, people usually will have those feelings get forced underground. And so forcing alone isn't effective because it doesn't take into consideration the importance of the relationship as well. Compromise, well, half a glass of water is better than nothing to drink. Well, a crust of bread's better than nothing to eat. Fine, we'll go visit your mother this weekend. Better that than staying home alone and not doing anything. What kind of trip's that going to be? I'm giving up something in order to get something back. So that's kind of half relationship, half point, but doesn't always work. And I noticed a lot of times with traditional bargaining, with traditional union negotiations, you kind of have to settle for less than you wanted, and the other side settles for less than they want. So you get an agreement, but everybody doesn't feel good about that agreement. We used to have something called the Contract Review Committee, and after we got a contract, this committee met every 3 weeks to argue about what we agreed on. And so, it's almost like it's bargaining all over again forever because everybody had to give something up. They didn't feel good about the agreement. So, again, are there times when that makes sense? Absolutely. And I'm not downgrading unions. I'm just saying that there are also times, though, when compromise leaves both of us wanting. So the relationship and the point isn't quite made the way we'd like. And then there's problem solving, where we sit down, honoring the relationship, but also making a point. That's good, and I'm not saying that's the one. All 5 of them could be the one. It depends on the situation you find yourself in. If you're about ready to smack somebody someday and somebody comes in your office, withdraw would be a good idea. I don't want to talk about it right now. I did that with my kids before when they were younger. They'd say, we want to talk about the allowances or something, and I'd say, not now, you don't. This isn't the right time. Maybe I'm having a terrible day at work or something. So I do want to talk to you about it, but now wouldn't be a good time. And they would kind of figure that out, and we would talk at another time. So I'm not saying problem solving is the only way. And the one drawback is it's time consuming. If the plane's going down into Lake Michigan, I don't want the pilot to break up into individual discussion groups amongst the passengers and talk about how we feel. I want the pilot to force a decision and get the plane back up in the air again. So, there are times when it makes sense and times when it doesn't. But let's, for now, talk about problem solving and how to do that. And we have a 3-step process we use, and it seems scripted, but in a way it is, but you can kind of modify it to fit your own needs. So the first step in this is I'm going to talk about what I need. A lot of times what happens, people have to get accusatory when they begin to do some type of confrontation. And when you do that, you'll tend to start to label. We think that's real clear, but it's unclear. Labels are things like you're a tad uncooperative, you're a bit, you've got a little bit of an attitude problem, your behavior's frustrating me. And once people hear those labels, they're what Norm and I call in our book the barbed wire words. They snag people, and because it reminds us of the playground. Hey, Shorty, hey, Four Eyes. Things that we heard in childhood that didn't feel real good, and now, whereas as an adult, we're still getting labeled. So labels also are vague. To say you need to be more cooperative, what does that mean? To some people, that would mean helping others when your work's complete. To other people, it might be not bad-mouthing the organization. To others, it would be supporting the policies of the company. Well, better to say, I need you to support the policies of the company rather than I need you to be cooperative, where it could mean 15 things to 15 different people. So we're talking about just filling in the blank, I need. So, examples, the kids' toys are all over the driveway when you come home at night, and it's frustrating you. You could say, you little brats, you're messy. Or you can say, hey, kids, I don't pick up toys I didn't play with. I need that driveway picked up now. Either way, you might get the driveway picked up. The first way, the problem's the kid. The second way, the problem's the messy driveway. And again, unless you want the child to go up and to see them and work with them for many years, you might want to have the problem focused on the driveway. So I know this sounds like a semantics game, but it really makes a big difference in terms of what I'm needing versus how you're versus attacking or labeling you. Let's say somebody's talking behind your back. Instead of saying you're a horrible gossip, you say, I really need you to tell me if you have an issue. Let's say that somebody's late all the time and it delays you from getting your work done. Instead of saying you're chronically tardy and it's irritating me, you say, I need you to be here on time. There's less of a charge when I say it this way. There's less of an emotional attachment to the statement than when I say you're lazy or shiftless or uncooperative or whatever. So let's say I do that. I need you to tell me if there's an issue rather than tell others. Most people then are going to react to that in a way to justify, blame, defend, or project. They're going to do something to pad their egos. So when that happens, this is when usually we get hooked and we start to argue back or explain ourselves. Instead of doing that, it's counterintuitive, but we want to have people acknowledge the feelings you feel and then fill in the blanks. Now, a lot of people get nervous about, well, how do I know what they feel? A lot of times I'll tell people it's going to be one of four, mad, sad, glad, or scared, because I couldn't think of anything that rhymed with mad, sad, and glad and meant scared. Mad, sad, glad, scared. Somebody says, I just got my vacation approved. Hey, it sounds like you're glad. Oh, here comes the boss. Hide me. Oh, it sounds like you're scared. I got a raise, and after the government took out the money, I made hardly anything. Oh, it sounds like you're mad. So you could, pretty much figure out what people are feeling, and then you acknowledge the feeling. Now, you can do passive listening, where I just go, but that'll irritate people if they're trying to come across with an emotion to you. You can do active listening, where you're repeating what people are saying. Somebody says, I went on vacation and had a good time. Oh, you went on a trip. You're repeating what they're saying. But this is really how people are feeling, and I think people want to hear that more. I mean, imagine somebody saying, I went on vacation. You went on vacation. We had a good time. You had a good time. We went to the Bahamas. You went to the islands. They're going to say, are you crazy? You're repeating everything. You think I'm repeating too much. It's going to drive them crazy. So what you do is when they're all finished, you say, sounds like you're feeling glad about that trip. That's what they're really wanting you to hear. And as I do that, I move the feelings out of the way. The third step of this, then, is I can empathize. That doesn't mean I agree. I don't say I know how you feel. I say I can understand how you might feel that way. I can understand how you might be frustrated. I can understand how you might be irritated. All I'm saying is, why don't we try to solve this together, or it sounds like we both need, or nonetheless, I still need you to be here on time. So this might sound like this. Mike, I need you to be here on time. And I say something like, well, what about the times that everybody else is late? I don't see you yelling at them. Your answer to that is, so you're feeling frustrated because you feel like I'm singling you out. I go, yeah, that's right. Well, I can understand how you might feel frustrated. Guess I'd feel that way too if I thought that I'm the only one being talked to. All I'm saying is that I think we need to have everybody here on time, and, I'm talking to you first. Now, the problem with the process, is the difficult part of the process, is step 2. So here's what happens instead of the feeling step. The tendency, instead of saying you feel and listening, is to order, warn, preach, advise, criticize, question, humor, withdraw, or explain. And I can best illustrate that with an example. Your 10-year-old, or let's say 14-year-old, sophomore in high school, comes home and says, Mom or Dad, just want to let you know I'm quitting school. I'm not comfortable with it. I'm failing the subjects. I don't get it. Johnny's got a job down at the gas station, making $7 an hour. I'm going to go ahead and get that job with him. I'm going to live with him and his girlfriend. How many of you would say, sounds like you're feeling angry about school right now, Timmy? No. You're going to say, hey, they're going to warn her. That bus comes tomorrow, your butt's in the front seat. That's what's going to happen. The kid says, oh, too big, you can't make me. And you say, I'll break your legs and drag you on the bus if I have to. Or you might preach. When I was your age, I walked 5 miles to the bus stop, and could do all that stuff. Or you advise, we're going to have a note sent home from the teachers. We're going to find out what subjects are missing, and we're going to fix this. Or you criticize. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Or you question, whoa, wait a minute. Who's working at a gas station? Who's living with a girl? What are you talking about? Or you humor. Oh, good, you're moving out. We'll rent your room out and make some money on you. Or you withdraw. We are not talking about this tonight. I am not listening to this. I've had a horrible day, and we are just not discussing this. Or you explain, now you know the value of an education, how important your mother and I feel, and the kid's not listening to anything. These are the people now that you see in the grocery stores and stuff, there would be over-explainers, or they count. Melissa, I'm counting. 1, 2, 3. Melissa, stop fooling around. 4, 5, 6, Melissa, and Melissa's still goofing around. My mom used to count, too. Count how many times she smacked me in the head if I was acting out. I'm not encouraging that. Don't call DCFS on us. But I am saying that sometimes that's ineffective. And explaining, nobody wants to hear your explanation. So instead of doing that, it's counterintuitive, but you would just say you're feeling frustrated. I can understand how you might feel frustrated. Nonetheless, I think we both need to see if we can't, and you try to work it out. I know this sounds simple, and again, it takes a lot of practice. When we were learning how to ride a bike, we didn't say, Mom, I'm going to go out in the backyard, then I'm going to go out to the highway, then I'm going to try to pedal down the median and learn how to ride this bike or die. Most of the time we stayed in the backyard, so if we fell over, we didn't get crushed like a bug. So, we're saying the same thing. You need to practice with this process and get comfortable with it before you take on the biggest jerk at work, because they're probably better at it than you are. And it's going to take some time, and it's going to take multiple attempts sometimes to get them to move where they want to go. So this is good for individual one-on-one confrontation. It's a great technique. We use this all the time. We teach people this. We practice it with them when we're doing our all-day seminars. And so it's a good tip, I think, of how you move, how you identify what the frustrating part of the jerk is, move their to the side, and then get to how you might be able to come to some conclusion. And, 90% of the time that'll work for you. What if you have a whole group that needs some intervention? So I want to turn it back over to Norm to talk about a little bit of how you might have group methods for problem solving that will help you work out things when you have more than one person involved.
Thanks, Mike. I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about an alternative dispute resolution process that I learned many years ago, and Mike and I have applied it to business and industry. Then we'd be more than happy to open it up to Q&A section and be able to answer questions for you. Many years ago, I went and took training to be a divorce mediator. It's basically what you do is you have two people that wouldn't spit on each other if they're on fire, parents, and you have to help them figure out how they're going to raise their children as going through a divorce. And we would do that in 3 hours or less. And what we found was that people with a little extra help, even people that conflicted, going through a divorce, arguing over custody, could, with a little extra help, be able to come to agreements and be able to live with those agreements. So we figure if it could work for that, it could work for business and industry. And actually, mediation, or they call it ADR, has been around since the 1800s. But to boil it down, as we said when we started this webinar today, is we wanted to give you some skills, some things that are observable and measurable, and some things that you can walk away with today. Taking a look at those perceptions drive the feelings and the behavior. So I don't want to change feelings and behavior. I'm going to try to ignore those or get those out of the way and try to deal with those perceptions. Mike's communication technique here of different ways of approaching people that not only wants to try to make your point, but also preserve the relationship. That's what I learned in mediation, is how do we go ahead and solve problems in the context of an ongoing relationship, which is extremely important. So I'm just going to briefly go over this. This could be a whole day training seminar, but I'm just going to go over with you the couple core components of what we call typical problem solving. You can take a look at it in 3 steps. And most Fortune 500 companies, most societies, governments, legal systems solve problems this way, where the first step is to identify, obviously, what the problems and issues are. And then once we get an idea of what the problems and the issues are, then people start formulating positions or solutions, right? I mean, think about meetings. We're in there and we operationally define what the concerns are, and everybody starts, coming up with positions or solutions. And what happens is then we start to funnel it down. So let's get it down to 1 or 2 solutions or positions, and we'll pick one. But that goes back to what I was saying earlier. You only want 2 ways how your day might go, good or bad. Mediation takes a look at what we call a funnel up technique. Because when you funnel it down like this and you have to pick one over the other, we call that either or thinking, or really that becomes winners and losers. If somebody wins, then somebody loses, and it damages the quality of the ongoing relationship. So how do we solve problems that at least does no damage and maybe, just maybe, makes the relationship better? And so we still have the same first step in the mediation method, which is identifying what the problems and the issues are. And then now, rather than going to how do we solve it, we talk about needs. We talk about shared interests. We talk about objective criteria. What do we need and what do we have in common? Because most people that are conflicted, or groups that are conflicted, sit down and talk about how far apart they are. Why would you do that? A sneaky mediator trick that Mike and I like to use is we got a big group together, is ask 4 or 5 questions that people have to answer in yes. Because when people are sitting down to negotiate, they think they're really far apart. But we'll say such things as, I bet it was difficult finding time to get together today, and I'm sure these issues are extremely important to everyone. And we'd like to be able to increase our market share or be able to work a little bit leaner. And everybody's going, yeah, and they're thinking, wow, maybe we're not as far apart as what we thought we were. That's needs-based discussion. The first diagram I was giving you is what we call positional bargaining. This is called needs-based. What do we need and what do we have in common? Then what we decide to do is start to take a look at funneling up. So now we formulate positions and solutions, multiple. Because when we do that, maybe, just maybe, we stumble on one that meets all of our needs. Quick example is, I always like this one, that you're dealing with a realtor and you're selling your house for $200,000 and the realtor thinks it's only worth $100,000. So you decide, you compromise, okay, we'll sell it for $150,000. and the house sells the next day, and you're thinking, oh my God, I got ripped off. I just lost $50,000. So let's say we did it needs-based. So what do we need? We need to get an accurate assessment. We need to get an appraisal. We need to find a fair price. So we go through all that. What do? Well, let's get 2 appraisals. We'll add them up and divide by 2. So they get 2 appraisals. They add them up, divide by 2, and it comes out at $150,000, and the house sells the next day. How is the homeowner feeling about it? Much different, all right? You got the same outcome, but the process was different. So we get to where we need to be, and we're taking a look at nurturing that ongoing relationship. So lastly, I'm just going to finish it up, and then we'll open it up to questions. And before we get to that, let me give you one other example. As we take a look at the mediation method, I forgot this one. This one we've been telling for years that, in the problem-solving event, let's say we're arguing over whether we're going to go out for dinner or a movie tonight. I get home tonight, and the wife says, let's go out for dinner, but I want to go see the new Justice League movie. So we're going to go back and forth, right? She's going to say, oh, I want to go out for dinner. And I'm going to say, well, I'd like to go to the movie. We could get, popcorn and soda right at the movie. And she says, well, you don't understand. I want to spend some time talking. Well, we could do that. We got 15 minutes to and from the theater. But I want to spend some time with you. And I said, well, honey, we'll get 2 seats right together. And eventually she's going to say, fine. And then we go to the movie, and, oh, boy, that's going to be fun, right? I'm going to say, do you want something to eat? No. Why did you come here? To make your life a living hell. Well, you won. Another way to take a look at that is rather than do the positional bargaining and disagree over dinner and a movie, we talk about what do we want out of Friday night. Well, I've been doing this webinar. I'm going to see some clients this afternoon. I just want to chill. She says, I'm a little bit hungry. We got kind of a nice day here in the Midwest. It's going to be bad weather coming up. Maybe we could, and we start inventing ideas. Maybe we could hang out. Maybe we could meet some friends. You see what I'm saying? Now we start inventing all sorts of positions or solutions, a funnel-up technique, and then maybe we can find one that meets all of our needs. Lastly, a stay or go stress model. I like this. So when something's happening, I try to fix it, try to impact the events. But I know about 80% of the time I can't fix it. 20% of the time I can. But if I can't fix it, what do? Well, I need to make a stay or go decision. Most of us will elect to stay, whether it's a job or relationship, whatever. So then I need to say, am I looking at things right? So I take a look at that perceptual thing that we were talking about earlier. How am I evaluating it? Is it accurate? And if it's not accurate, I change things. And if I change it, I feel and I behave differently. Sometimes, I feel like I'm looking at it adequately, but you know what? Or realistically, I stay. Then if I choose to stay, then I need to figure out how do I manage my stress? What can I do in order to stay in that environment again, whether it's a job or a relationship, until I'm ready to go? And ultimately, if I can't manage my stress, then I need to make a go decision. But I need to be able to do that with the idea that maybe it was a healthy move for myself. So I think at this point, we could take a look at opening it up to some questions.
Happened there, but if anyone has any questions, if you could type it in the chat box.
That would be good.
Okay, so one question is, explain about feelings and behaviors being byproducts. What do you mean by that?
The feelings and behaviors, as I was saying earlier, are like the caboose on a train. If we focus on feelings and behavior, those don't change. As Mike was saying, we need to be able to take a look at the perceptions and sometimes try to ignore some of the feelings and the behavior unless the behavior is dangerous. But if we focus on that, it's like anger management. Why do we want to manage a difficult employee or a difficult situation? Wouldn't we want to change it? And then we need to get past the feelings and the behavior and be able to focus on the perceptions. Because again, if you change that, just like a society or a culture or a religion is a shared set of beliefs. If we can identify what those beliefs are and moderate it a little bit, you get a different culture. There's a book out called Change the Culture, Change the Game. It's by Connors and Smith. And one of the things that they state is what Mike and I found many years ago is too often leaders attempt to change the way people act without changing the way they think, their beliefs. As a result, they get compliance but not commitment. They get involvement, but not investment, and progress, but not lasting performance. If you can change the perceptions, the feelings and behavior change automatically.
Awesome, makes sense. Another one that came in, which conflict style should a person use? Is one better than the other?
What we usually say is start out trying to problem solve, because it's easier to move from problem solving to one of the others, but a little tougher to move from one of the others back to problem solving. There's not one better than another. It depends on you, your mood, your feelings, and the situation. But let's say that there's an issue with an employee or a coworker even. I'm going to try to attempt to sit down and discuss that using the technique that we shared. If that doesn't work, then we can always go to the boss, withdraw, and let the boss deal with it. We can try to smooth it over because I got to live with them. We could try to withdraw. I'm just not going to hang out with them then. Or we can force and try to get the boss to make them act differently. But I'd like to give them the opportunity to talk with me first before I go to one of the other styles. But there are times, like I say, when you have you've just had about enough with somebody, and maybe withdrawing or doing something different would be your first choice, smoothing or doing something else, because maybe that's just where you are today, or maybe that's where they are. A client comes in and is yelling at you. It isn't time to problem solve. They've got to vent first. And then once they're feeling heard, then we can go ahead and use problem solving. But rule of thumb is we usually start with problem solving first if we can, and then move to one of the others if needed.
Okay. And what if you confront and they don't change? What is the next step?
Well, usually I have a one-step, two-step. The first step is what we put on there. The second step is, and here's where most people try it once, and then they think that they're done, and they're not. Sometimes it's going to take more than one time to get people to change. What I do and what Norm and I do together is, let's say I talk to somebody and I say, they really need to have you be on time, and they go, yeah, that sounds good, and they're going to try to do that, and then they're late 3 more times. Then I call them in and I use the inquiry method where I just say, gee, I'm a little confused. Help me understand this. I thought we were going to be working on the attendance and the tardiness issue, and yet it's still occurring. What's going on? Asking questions is better than accusing. You don't call them in and say, look, you said you were going to change and you didn't. Instead of that, you just say, help me understand why this hasn't changed yet and what has to occur for this to happen, and get the dialogue going again. If that doesn't work even after that, then you've got those other conflict style choices. I could go to the boss and have an intervention. I could withdraw. I could try to smooth it over. There's all sorts of other choices. But if I have to go to the boss, at least I've given that person 2 opportunities to deal with it with me first, so I don't feel bad about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and another one is talk more about how it's important to change thinking before people will change behavior.
Because again, that's really where that's really the engine. But that sometimes it's difficult to be able to see that, because the feelings and the behavior are fairly obvious, right? You can see how somebody's feeling. The emotions are written all over their face, and the behavior is you can see what's going on. Sometimes it's difficult to figure out what the thinking is. And so sometimes what I do with clients in the office is I have them write down the activating event, what happened, then have them immediately write down what they felt or what they did. And then spend some time going back up and say, what did I say to myself? How did I perceive that? And was it accurate? What were some of the statements I was making to myself? And there's only 2 ways of doing that. You need to speak it out or write it out. It's kind of like, have you ever been in an argument with somebody and halfway through you realize you're dead wrong, but you keep on arguing anyway? Because, you just heard yourself and it didn't make any sense. In your head, it made perfect sense. That's why it's great to be able to talk to people or write things out. Because thoughts and thinking in our own head remind me of my dog chasing its tail. It just goes around and around and around. If you close your eyes and for 15 seconds try to think of the dog. For me, I think hot dog, baseball, beer. The Cubs won a year ago. They lost this year. Mind just kind of trails off. So trying to get that out of your head so you can see it and see if they cluster in those 4 critical thinking errors or distortions we talked about earlier. Because if I change that, I change my feelings, I change my behavior.
Okay. And what if you're doing problem solving and can't agree on joint needs? What else can you do?
Then you have to go to one of the other styles. If we're doing and we can't agree on what the needs are, then we need to be able to say, can we compromise? Mike was alluding to earlier, we see compromise as lose-lose. I got to give up something, you got to give up something. To me, it damages the relationship. But you raise a good point with that question, is what we talk about works a lot of the time, but I don't know anything besides gravity that works every time. You jump up, you don't float sometimes, you come down. With the techniques here, these will work majority of the time, but they're also geared towards the quality of the relationship. You want to be able to do confrontation. You want to be able to problem solve that makes the relationship better. Sometimes we just need to make the point. And we can try all this stuff and it doesn't work, then there's something we call positional power. The supervisor, the owner of the company, at the end of the day, wins. You try to do the rest of the stuff to nurture that relationship, but if they're not having it, then somebody needs to make a decision.
The other thing that Norm said earlier, too, the objective criteria, when he's doing the interest-based bargaining, if they can't agree on a need, sometimes they can agree on letting somebody else determine what the need is. In this case, and he gave a great example of that when he talked about how they had to go to the appraisers to find out what the cost of the house should be so that everybody has their need for fairness satisfied. And so going to the appraiser to make the decision will work. Let's say that you're in a group problem-solving process and they're arguing with you and no one can agree on needs. You can say, well, can we then agree that we're going to present some of these things to Ted, the boss, and let Ted make the decision? That works as well when you can't get it done otherwise.
Very good. Another question is, are there any other books you would recommend to read?
Well, of course, we like to recommend ours, which is called Harnessing the Power of Conflict. And recently, we just updated the same kind of techniques and put it into a book called After 40 Years in Therapy, What Have I Learned? And it's basically the cognitive behavioral therapy we're talking about right now, as well as effective communication and problem solving. The other book that we liked from the past would be Crucial Conversations, or the one I quoted earlier is called Change the Culture, Change the Game by Connors and Smith. It's by Penguin Publishers, 2011. Pretty good book.
Thanks, Norm. Are there any other questions out there? We still have like 10 minutes. We have typing. No, Pam said thank you.
Well, good.
Any other burning questions out there for Mike and Norm? I'm sorry I wasn't able to open the phone lines. There was a lot of feedback going on there. But if you guys have any questions for them, after we get off this webinar, I have their contact information here, their email addresses, or you can shoot me an email and I'll put you in touch with them. So I would like to conclude today's webinar dealing with jerks at work. Obviously, it's a big issue out there, so we'd like to thank you, Mike and Norm, for addressing it and giving us all of this information to go back and deal with the jerks. Please visit FMA's website for additional information on joining or attending other educational programs. I mentioned our annual meeting that's coming up in Scottsdale in March. That's a great one, a lot of management and leadership topics there. And I also wanted to remind you one more time regarding the survey that I'm going to email the registrants, but please feel free to forward it on to anyone else that joined you, since only the registrant will receive that email link. I will send a copy of their slides to you and the recording of this webinar. I usually get the recording a couple days afterwards, so it'll be sometime next week. And that's all I have. So we look forward to your participation in future events. Have a happy Friday and a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.